On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GBNews,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello, I'm Andrew Doyle, and in a moment it will be time for Headliners, where I'll be taking you through tomorrow's newspapers with the help of my brilliant comedian panel. But first, here's the news bulletin with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. In the last hour, MPs have been voting in favour of a government bill allowing parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol to be scrapped. The bill has now passed its first hurdle in Parliament, but it's due for a second reading in the coming weeks. Boris Johnson wants to make it easier for some goods to flow from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. The EU says the bill breaks international law and it's preparing to take legal action. Meanwhile, the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, says he is heartbroken by the murder of a woman in East London. Police have arrested a 29-year-old man in Ilford on suspicion of murder. Detectives say they believe a stranger attacked 35-year-old Zara Alina near Gants Hill Station early yesterday morning. The Met Police is urging women in the area to be alert but not alarmed.
Tackling violence against women and girls is an absolute priority for the Met. Every day, our officers are working with partners across London to help improve safety in our public spaces. Women should not have to change their behaviour and should be able to go about their business feeling safe any time of day or night. And it is our job to ensure that happens.
In news away from home, Russian airstrikes have killed at least 13 people at a shopping centre in central Ukraine. Rescue missions are still ongoing in the town of Kremenchuk, where crews are still digging through rubble. President Zelensky says more than 1,000 civilians were inside the building at the time of the attack. Dozens of people are injured and officials say the number of victims is expected to rise. And all this happened as G7 leaders in Germany discussed new aid for Ukraine. They vowed to support Ukraine financially and militarily for as long as it takes. In a joint statement, they condemned the airstrikes as abominable. And Boris Johnson said it showed just how cruel and barbaric the Russian president is. And Nato is increasing its quick reaction force from 40,000 personnel to more than 300,000. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg confirmed the move ahead of a summit in Madrid this week. He says Russia's invasion was the biggest threat NATO has faced since the Cold War. And finally, on the opening day of Wimbledon, 3 British players have beaten their opponents in the first round. Former world number 1 Andy Murray rose from a set down to beat the unseeded Australian James Duckworth. Emma Raducanu put her side strain behind her and marked her centre court debut by reaching the second round of the tournament. And British number one Cameron Norrie saw play suspended after only half an hour because of the rain, but nevertheless eventually won his first set in 23 minutes. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Andrew Doyle, and tonight are two incredibly talented comedians joining me by the names of Josh Howie and Lewis Schaefer. That was a bit much as an incredibly talented. I'd say, you know, competent would have been more...
I'll handle. I'd like competent.
Yeah?
People have said that I'm sober and on time, or I used to be.
Those are your best qualities.
Yeah.
Not to be sniffed at that.
And I'm usually free, so I'm available.
You're an inspiration to us all.
We aspire to be like Lewis Schaefer. Yeah. We need to crack on with the show. We're going to have a look at tomorrow's front pages first, and we start with the Daily Mail. Daily Mail has doctors demand 30% increase. So we've had teachers threatening to strike, and of course rail strikes, various strikes, barristers even striking, and now doctors wanting a piece of the action. We move on now to the Daily Telegraph, which has Army Chief, Ukraine is our 1937 moment. This is a general saying that the UK must be ready for war with Russia as NATO is announcing a troop expansion. Move on to the Independent now. Russia targets shopping centre with 1,000 inside. So there's been a missile strike in central Ukraine, which has been targeting a civilian shopping centre. Lots of people killed. A terrible story there. We'll be covering that. And an image of Emma Raducanu there. And now The Guardian. The Guardian has prospect of strike grows as doctors eye 30% pay deal. That's that story which we will be getting to. And an image of Raducanu there either jumping for joy or demonstrating her powers of levitation. Let's move on to the Financial Times, which runs with NATO buttresses eastern flank by increasing forces to 300,000. We will be getting on to NATO in a moment. And now we go on to Tuesday's Mirror, which has Helen's killer takes secrets to the grave. This is the killer of Helen McCourt has died, but he hasn't told the family where he hid her body. On to the Daily Express now. They lead with a crime against humanity. There's an appalling image there of the shopping centre that was bombed in Ukraine. Moving on to the Metro, they run with the same story there. Shoppers murdered by Russia. This is the missile strike. We will definitely be talking about that. And finally, the Daily Star. Turn that ruddy light out. And this is a new scheme at the National Grid. Apparently, they're going to pay us to sit in the dark in order to save on energy bills. And those are your front covers. So we're going to get straight cracking on with this. Now, Josh, we're going to start with this story, which is about the NHS and a 30% pay rise thereafter. That seems a lot to me.
That does seem a lot, but you know what? It's for good reason, because Dr. Emma Runswick, who presented the motion, said that she wants doctors to be able to have comfort and pleasure. Okay. And I think going for both of those is a little bit greedy.
So they should have comfort or pleasure?
Choose one or the other. Really, do you need both?
So now, this is the issue. I mean, we're talking about doctors here, and obviously we all hugely appreciate what they do for us, but they are well paid, aren't they?
Well,
Can I say that?
But they're arguing that they've lost 30% in real terms over the previous 5 years because of not having pay rises and whatnot. So, yes, the average GP earns about £100,000 a year.
It's not too shabby.
That's pretty good, Dosh, there.
By American standards.
Is that not good?
Not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can't compare everything to America, Lewis. This is what you continually do.
Yeah.
And inevitably we fall short if we do that. But don't you think, Lewis, in a way that, you know, this will put some people's backs up? Because, of course, it's such a necessity to have the NHS properly staffed.
Yeah.
And a strike at the NHS can have serious ramifications, and the people involved are already being paid a substantial amount.
Well, you raised 2 points there. One is that, you know, are the doctors needed? And
you've got Google, right?
I think there are places in the world where doctors have gone on strike and the death rate has gone down.
So you think...
Which place is that?
Yeah.
Your country, Israel. Yeah.
I don't think that's Josh's country.
Whatever, but you know what
It's
I
your
mean.
country, mate. That's your
All right,
safety zone as well.
But yeah, you Google it out there. You'll have the people in the back Google it. Doctors strike, death rate goes down.
Maybe that's because people are a bit safer during that time because they think, oh, I better not have an accident, so they all stay in. And
it can work both ways.
By the same token, I mean, look, if doctors are so important, and it is important as well, like the Dr. Brunswick says, comfort, pleasure, actually living a comfortable life is quite important, especially if you want to hold on to doctors in the NHS and to stop them from going to private establishments.
There's already a shortage of 8,000 doctors. It's going to get worse as almost half of all family doctors are planning to quit in the next couple of years.
Yes.
So there's already an issue with the number of doctors and retaining them.
Yes.
And you're right. I do think they do need to get paid. 30% sounds like a lot, but as one of the people who was speaking at the conference here, Dr. Joanna Sutton-Klein said, well, it's interesting, first of all, she mentions the train union. So I think the trains have, even though they haven't had the pay rise yet, I think media-wise they've been so successful because of Mick that he's sort of smashed it that that they're kind of going, oh well, we want a bit of that, and she literally says, vote for, all around us, train unions are coming together and winning big.
Yeah, so this is the problem, isn't it? It's the thin end of the wedge. Yeah. Once you give some people an inch, and then everyone else wants an inch.
No, it's not just that. It's the fact is, as Josh is right, is that they haven't been paid properly due to inflation for years.
No, but neither is anyone else.
No, neither is anyone else. So this is a redux of my life in the 1970s. I lived through inflation. I know I look young and beautiful, but I lived through inflation, and it was the most boring time in the world because one after another then gets worse and worse and worse.
It does. And we're in that situation now. But look, I'm not going to begrudge doctors, and I think it's important that they have a...
Out of everybody, I'd rather give the doctors the money than train drivers.
And what about the nurses?
Yeah,
and
the nurses want 14% pay rise. I think fair enough, and junior doctors want 22%.
Yeah, I suppose.
Can I just
very
say,
quickly, Lewis,
can I just say that we don't? That I think doctors are overvalued.
You've made that point, Lewis. It's a controversial one, but that's why you're here. Tuesday's Times now, and with the ever-increasing Russian threat towards it, NATO looks to be stepping up. So, Lewis, what's this about?
Well, what it's about is about the change of policy, which I didn't even know existed, and I've spoken to a NATO expert, and she didn't even know this thing existed. That in the eastern flank of NATO, there's a policy which is basically, if the Russians attack, we'll give them 180 days to stay there. And then we'll...
So this is the tripwire policy. This idea that in the Baltic states, so Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, if Russia were to invade, there would be after 180 days, NATO would then come in and kick them out. But by that point, as the presidents of these various states are saying, there'll be nothing left.
They'll be ensconced there.
Right. What do you think of this, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, that policy made sense when we could sort of somehow predict Putin, but he's kept on getting more and more aggressive, and it makes sense for that. Essentially what they're really talking about is reinforcing the line.
Yes.
That's what they're saying, but they're using lots of euphemisms here because someone gets paid a lot of money to come up with, trip the light fantastic and tripping the wire and deterrence by denial and whatnot.
I mean, it's not just reinforcement. They want to have permanent NATO stationed there permanently.
Rotating troops.
Right, because if they don't do that, and if there is an attack, there cannot be an immediate
that's what they're saying.
response,
So pre-positioned weapons, supplies across the region, and basically, and this is what one of the generals says, he says, which I quite like here, Russians can read from it that even if they tried, they would be wiped off the earth in the first few hours. So someone there, a senior defence official, channeling Putin, trying to beat him at his own game there.
A bit of
no, that's what makes this completely offensive is basically the Estonians, Lithuanians, and Latvians have never done anything for us, yet they want us to be stationed there to protect them.
Well, not us particularly, NATO.
Yeah, NATO, which is us. What do you think it is? Who do you think is going to die? Who do you think is in NATO? I think Britain's in NATO until
That's
the last I looked, and America's in NATO.
I'm sure they're going to put some troops there as well, mate. And Estonia is a great country.
I'm not saying it's not. It is a good country. It is. My ancestors probably came from over there.
Probably
were kicked out of there.
You can tell Lewis hasn't even done research into his own ancestry. So can we really trust your judgment on the paper?
Actually, I have, and they do come from there.
Well, look, can I ask you this, though? I mean, it might be a controversial point, but is it not the case that years and years of NATO expansion has actually escalated the Russian threat, and that by doing this, we might be making matters worse, potentially?
Well, I mean, this chicken and the egg argument is, the fact is, it's Putin as the one who's been overtly aggressive.
Yes, I know, absolutely.
I know the point that you're saying, and some people are arguing that. I personally don't agree with it because we say like, oh, NATO's been expanding, but during that time, Putin has been also going into Chechnya, going into all these different places.
And I'm not defending Putin or his invasion of Ukraine. All I'm saying is that Russia has made it abundantly clear for many, many years that Ukraine membership of NATO is a red line, and yet people here have been flirting with that idea, suggesting that it's definitely going to happen.
I definitely agree with you, Andrew, is that I think what we've been not even poking the bear, we've just been niggling it. And the Russians are a very sensitive people. They have no natural defenses. It's basically an open plain all the way to Moscow. And all the Russians they have two things to defend themselves. One is a crazy leader who's capable of doing anything.
Well, that's what's scary, isn't it?
And the second thing is just room.
Well, you know what, mate? Let's go and explain to the Ukrainians who are dying at the don't because of this mad, aggressive nutter.
They are dying. They're dying for
the
the same reason the Estonians are going to get into trouble.
I don't think that to acknowledge this point, though, is to belittle what they're going through at all. Simply to say that we need to try and understand what Russia has said.
You can understand it.
They could be wrong, but they perceive the eastward expansion of NATO to be a threat to their sovereignty. Whether that's true or false, that is the perception.
Yeah, it's like accusing them of being a bear. You have to treat a bear differently than a dog or a person.
I'm not saying that Ukraine did everything perfectly over the last, when they got into power, when they were like, yes, we're going to join NATO straight away, ha ha ha, whatever. Yeah. That was like 10 years ago or something. They have not played the game very well, but that is just because you prod the bear. So what? Now the bear's ripping the face off.
Yeah, so exactly, it's an impossible situation. What do we do now? Do we step up?
It's not a bear. It's a civilization. It's a person who is making these choices. It's not a bear. It's not an animal. It's a thinking human being.
Person with fears that are different than ours that need to be respected. I think my analysis was brilliant.
Yes, thank you, Lewis. I'm sure it was. Now, Tuesday's Metro. This is a very, very sad story. That does remind us of the devastating impact of this war. Now, this bomb. I mean, Josh, this. At a shopping centre, it's just appalling.
Bomb at a shopping centre in Ukraine. I mean, really, we should get Lewis to
stop pounding the table. You're like
this.
I'm sure not even Lewis, with his heart of steel, would attempt to justify this. I mean, look.
So they're saying there are 1,000 people in there.
Yeah.
There's 11 dead confirmed, many more injured,
Probably
but
more.
that obviously is going to go way up.
Yeah.
And the main point is there's no strategic value to an attack. It's just an attack on civilians.
And this is an area that up until now had pretty much escaped.
Yeah, that hadn't really had anything. Yeah. So the purpose is to strike fear and to kill innocent people.
We assume that's what it is, and I cannot see any. Well, look, I'm against war, full stop, but I cannot see any possible justification for deliberate attacks on civilians.
We don't know. First of all, it is horrible. It's very bad, but we don't know if that's what happened.
You mean if it was accidental?
Yeah, if it was accidental, if it was something else, we don't know.
Do you think that behind one of the ice cream shops or something there was actually some secret room?
I think what Lewis is trying... Are you trying to suggest that we don't really know what's been going on over there because we are getting conflicting reports? But this is pretty clear what's happened here.
It seems like it's clear, but it's the fog of war. Lots of things seem clear.
Well, there's less fog with mobile phones and there's much less.
What about this thing that Biden now saying that he is going to send long-range and medium-range missile defense systems?
Yeah. Well, that's
a pledge.
Yeah.
And that is sort of what they need, isn't it?
And if that gets to them and it gets to them in time,
yes.
But that's what they need because at the moment they have. What happened was when they started invading and going towards Kiev, in the first few hours of the war, I think Ukraine shot down 7 aircraft in 11 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's with cruise and ballistic missiles. So that was good, and that has kept that kind of aerial bombing out.
Yes.
But they can't stop these missiles and whatever, except for this thing called these NASAMS. It's an air defense system, and what they're talking about now is one of the lieutenant colonel for the Ukrainian army basically said this will help close the sky. So if they can just close the sky, create this kind of dome over Ukraine, then these kind of things won't happen.
Well, let's move on from war because I feel like we're a bit mired in that. Let's see if we can get something a bit more jolly. This is Tuesday's Guardian. And if you thought our lockdowns were bad, well, China wants them to last for 5 more years. I said jolly. This isn't jolly at all, is it?
Well, did you say China, or I thought you were talking about New Zealand? It was so draconian.
Well, yes, but of course they were a small island, and they were able to do that. But this is China, and China of course, were obviously hit hard during the start of the pandemic, and now they are saying 5 years. 5 years for mandatory masking and lockdown regulations.
And strict residential inspections, regular testing, management of the entry and exit to the city.
Yeah.
Well, this is what this is. What this situation is just using COVID as an excuse to take political control, which basically...
But you think they already have political control?
They have political control. No, they don't. It's a very uncontrollable country. It's huge. Yes, and Xi has control, but he doesn't have complete control, and people are turning on him because the rate of economic growth is not as fast as it was.
But people said that the reason why they were able to lock down so effectively at the start of the pandemic is precisely because China is authoritarian in nature.
They can literally lock them into their apartments.
But then people started saying that was a good thing. I mean, I remember people over here saying, "Well, that's the upside of authoritarianism." I thought, come on.
Yeah. I mean, and we have to remember at the end that they're human beings, and that, did you see the videos of that, like in Shanghai, all the people screaming in the towers?
Yeah, it's horrible.
I mean, it's not like they're conditioned to... That people want freedom. It's an inherent part of human nature.
Yes.
So to push like this... But interestingly, they said a statement came out, it said 5 years, and then after a while, people freaked out, and it seems now it's been pulled, and now they can't...
Well, people were tweeting about it, and then the tweets were disappearing.
Yeah, but this is
of course, the Chinese government monitors absolutely everything, But what I don't understand about this is, they had this dynamic zero policy, right? And this, of course, related to the original version of the pandemic. And now there's Omicron, and now there's the new version, which is much milder but transmits much, much quicker. So it doesn't apply to this now.
Well, absolutely. And the other thing is, of course, what we recently covered was the death rate has gone plummeted down. It can be treated in hospitals. So, I don't know, this is my personal theory is, it was made in China. They know that if you get it, there's going to be like some secondary thing. Even though you're cured, you're not really. You're going to die in like 10 years. We're all going to die, and that's why they're going for this zero COVID.
No, you're talking about it like it's a real thing, like COVID is a real thing.
I thought my conspiracy theory was stupid.
No,
but you're coming up with a whole new level.
The pair of you conspiracy theorists, and stop doom mongering, please. Let's just lighten the mood a bit. We're going to go
Stop pounding on the table,
Mail,
Josh.
Lewis. Tuesday's Mail now. There's trouble brewing at home for the Prime Minister. Josh, again. I mean, he's not having a good time.
I don't want to talk about Boris Johnson again, but he can't help himself.
Well, he's in the papers.
Yeah, he's in the papers. So this is it. So Boris Johnson, he's going to delay a cabinet reshuffle until the autumn. Now,
why?
Well, I personally think because he wants to see who will stay loyal until then. Possibly. The other reason is, of course, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
It's so Machiavellian, isn't it?
If you're going to kick a couple of these people out who seem like the Environment Secretary, the Business Secretary, Trade Secretary, if he puts them into the back benches, they're going to be causing some trouble.
Right. So this is the problem. And I read the other day about how, because they're trying to change the rules now to try and get him out. They're trying to change the rules about he's got a year's...
6 months instead or something.
Yeah, he's got a year's grace because he won the vote of no confidence, and they can change the rules with the 1922 committee so they can get him out. And someone has said that if 3 cabinet ministers were to resign, that would be the end for him, but they won't want to resign because they all want to be prime minister, right?
Yeah.
So we're dealing with... These are power games. That's what's going on here, isn't it, Lewis?
I have no understanding of this. It's so anti-democratic. It's like, who are these people? I mean, they want to be prime minister. Nobody knows anybody who's in this government except for Boris Johnson. They don't know.
Well, they're not as... They don't make as much of an impact, do they?
Yeah.
That's certainly the case.
And they have no power base of their own.
But Boris is talking about how he's going to be Prime Minister for another decade. This just seems delusional to me. After the by-election, you sort of think, and he's taking absolutely no response. He doesn't even entertain the possibility that he might step down.
If you saw Boris Johnson 10 years ago, you would not think he'd be Prime Minister.
This is true. Yeah. Lewis, you're right. He does defy expectations.
But he's saying the government is getting on with delivering for the people of the country. No, it's not. And we've got a huge amount to do. Well, Tories, you've been in power for 12 years, mate.
Well, he is tenacious, I'll give him that. We're going to move on to The Guardian now with a look into the Queen's political influence over the Scottish. Lewis, what's this about?
Well, this is something that's shocking to me, is that you always think the Queen has, like, the final say at the end, but according to The Guardian, is that the Queen has initial say at the beginning, whether something's even discussed or not, to become a law.
Yeah, but this is just in Scotland, right? So you've heard of royal...
No,
I think it's only that they found it. They've got sort of proof that it's in Scotland, but
So it talks in this article about the distinction between royal assent. So it's just the Queen sort of signing off, and that's like a matter of routine. She may as well have a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
And this thing, which they call Queen's consent, as opposed to royal assent.
Yes.
OK, and this idea is that she can actually modify stuff if it pertains to her private property. Or so, I mean, that's mad, right?
And the whole country's her private property.
Right, exactly. But
there was a saying. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm just saying that the article talks about how there were at least, well, the Guardian say there's at least 67 instances
in Scotland, but here it says since 1952 there's been 1,000 laws under the Queen's consent mechanism.
No, but does that mean that the Queen's lawyers have looked at the various bills?
It's exactly the same thing. It's Scotland, but across the
I would like to know how many have the Queen's lawyers actively changed, have said, you need to change that?
There's no reason to suspect that they haven't changed all 1,000. If it relates to her property or whatever, yeah.
So here's an example. It says, last year, the Queen's lawyers secretly lobbied Scottish ministers to change a draft law to exempt her private land from a major initiative to cut carbon emissions.
Yeah, so now her land is the only land in the country in Scotland where you don't need to build pipes anymore to save...
But this is incredible because the whole point of having a symbolic head of state like the Queen, like the monarch, who doesn't actually have, isn't democratically elected. We've got Parliament to handle all that. But the idea that she could actually, we always thought of her as a figurehead, but if she's actually sort of, crossing the I's, dotting the T's, moving the documents around, I'm not saying she's doing it, but her team, that's a real problem, right?
Andrew, wake up. The Queen has power. Okay, the Queen is a somebody, and people in this country act like she doesn't do anything. It's chilling if this can be done in the beginning and at the end.
Well, someone says here it's an astonishing overturning of the widely held principle that the monarch does not legislate for her own benefit. There is a positive there, is that these 1,000 laws that they've looked at in the last 70 years or so are laws that relate directly to her and her land. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's not like she's passing legislation or checking on wider things about education.
I mean, were we better off when the monarch was in charge, back in the day?
But this is not an overturning, because this has been in existence forever. So,
no, that's right.
So it's not an overturning. That the fact the Queen is involved in this is the fact that our press is so inferior the British press is so inferior that nobody knows about this. And
the Guardian's reporting on it now.
It's a bit late.
I didn't know, and I was astonished by this. So anyway, we've got to go to a break now. But coming up after the break, the trans debate in sport rages on with Boris Johnson getting involved. And has the government invested in a sex company? See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle, and continuing our romp through Tuesday's news are comedians Josh Howie and Lewis Schaefer. Tuesday's Times now. This is an investigation into how criminals are getting your money using adverts. Josh, what's this?
Yeah, so gangs are making up to £1 million a day using these fake celebrity adverts. Some of the celebrities include Duchess of Cambridge, Holly Willoughby, Martin Lewis. I don't know if Martin Lewis is a celebrity, he's well known anyway. But they are making some serious money from it. And I thought when I first read this, is like some like pop-out advert will just say, "Hi, I'm the Duchess of Cambridge.
Yeah.
You know, I've invested $1 million. If you send me your bank details, I can, you know, get some of it to you and you can help me out," or something like that.
It's not that, then.
It's not that. It turns out she is totally fine. She didn't inherit the money. What it is these little sort of pop-ups on the bottom of some blogs and some websites and various other, like, online content. And those things will go through to these fake websites. And in this case, with the Duchess of Cambridge, it was like there was a picture of her with a black eye or something.
What?
Yeah, and you click on it, you go, how did she get rid of it? Oh, she was... And then you go on it, it gets some cream.
So these things,
helps.
I mean...
Look, and then you never get... So you give them your money and then you never get the product delivered.
But I mean, $1 million a day, I mean, I'm in the wrong
This
job.
was from a Bitcoin scam, yeah.
But on the other hand, like, don't these things get taken down? They must be taken down.
You know what?
quickly.
This is such a non-story. It's one of the typical Times stories about how bad the internet is. It's just a clickbait where someone clicks on something which is interesting, or they think is going to be interesting, and then they're sold something else that is not delivered. So it's just a.
Well, it's not a non-story for the celebrities though, because they're having their image used, their persona used without their consent.
Yeah, well, that's another issue. Okay, so you say, well, celebrities are complaining because that's a copyright, not a copyright issue, a plagiarism issue, something else.
But this is different from the online safety bill, which is going to an Ofcom. This is not regulated by Ofcom. This particular thing. So this is why there's just this loophole here.
It's just the Wild West, isn't it? I mean, if you're a computer competent, you can make a fortune.
Well, that's what, and they're making a lot of money.
Anyway, on to tomorrow's Daily Mail now. And previously we've heard about trans swimmers crashing the competition. This time it's skateboarders, Lewis.
Well, out in LA they had a competition or whatever, where a skateboarding competition. There was an open competition, and a trans woman who was 29. She beat a little 13-year-old girl.
The 13-year-old girl came second, right?
Came second.
I mean,
right.
just look at the article though. It talks about how all of the other competitors are teenagers. So was this trans woman identifying as a teenager as well?
Yeah, she could have been. I mean, there's lots of ways you could be identified: by height, by weight. You know, how pushy their parents are to get them involved in something like this.
I mean, I feel bad for the 13-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't fair, is
so
it?
the winner won $500 and she got $250. And this has been highlighted by another female skateboarder called Taylor Silverman, who a couple of weeks ago, I remember she went online and showed how her last few competitions, she's literally lost thousands of dollars by being beaten by trans women. In the final, you don't just lose the prize money, you're losing sponsorship. And you know, they're like, and even in this competition, which is a much smaller one of the 6 competitors included a 10-year-old who came 5th, or as I call it, 4th.
Right. Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Like, if you're a young girl and you want to get into athletics or something, and you see this kind of thing, and you know the photograph's quite interesting because you can see this 13-year-old girl and a 29-year-old huge, you know,
which mirrors a photo even from a few weeks ago from cycling in this country, where there was a teenage girl, and then there were the people. She came 3rd and 1st and 2nd with these 2 trans women who were like twice her size.
And Lewis, just imagine you were a 10-year-old girl who wanted to be the world's top athlete.
She's not. First of all, it's not based on speed or distance. It's based on an artistic appreciation.
No, it's not. No, of course it isn't.
Skateboarding.
How high you can go.
No, that's not what it was.
Yeah, no, but the point
is, was an all
your
skills
athleticism
level.
is going to be connected to your physicality. So if you can pull off a bigger trip.
No, you know what? There was just another case of whiny, complaining kids.
So, OK, Lewis, I defer to your skateboarding expertise because I know nothing about it.
I'll say this.
Well, I do.
They're being judged on artistic merit, I assume.
No, it's not like they're going like wishy-washy.
Yeah, they say, oh,
I'm a skateboarder. No,
Josh,
it's a very physical sport.
You have actually done skateboarding, right?
I have done skateboarding. I used to be OK. I'm very, very bad at the moment. I had a terrible accident about a year ago when I was trying to show off to my kids. I was like, hey, guys, this is how it's done, and just fell massively off the ramp and just crippled myself.
I mean, have you ever really recovered from that in their eyes? Because I don't know how you get your authority back.
They just laugh every time they see me now.
This is the problem, you see. Now, let's move on now to tomorrow's Independent. And Boris Johnson, he's stating some biological facts, some biological truth bombs
Well, here we go. Boris Johnson says that a person cannot be born with a penis without being a man. And it's annoying because all of the things that Boris lies about, and this,
and he gets this one right.
And this is the one time he's telling the truth.
So you know what the problem?
And the other side are the ones who are lying.
So the problem with this is, of course, that so many of the feminists who are rightly angry about what's going on here with gender identity ideology, now they're going to have to agree with Boris Johnson. They won't like that because they're all left wing.
Yeah.
You know, it's but he's right.
Yeah.
I include myself amongst them.
He is right, but the tragedy of this entire thing is that Boris Johnson's situation is so bad in every other aspect that he finds this situation less problematic.
So do you think he's talking about this as a means to distract from all, let's face it,
yeah. Well, that's what Stonewall's saying. But no, I think he's been actually given, finally a politician has been given some good guidance, and actually he sounds like he's up on the issues, which he says the three things that he's concerned about are the age of consent, basically to transition, question of safe spaces for women, and the difficulty in sporting competitions. Now, these are the three things that most people who are involved in this debate care about.
Yes.
And so he's actually got someone briefing him properly, and I just wish that person who was briefing him would go to Keir Starmer and brief that side, because it's incredibly frustrating that they're trying to be like, oh, wishy-washy, be kind. It's like, no, there are proper issues here that have to be dealt with.
Absolutely.
And now the Tories are absolutely using him and smashing Labour at it.
What's very annoying about this, though, is that the Stonewall individual who you mentioned, who said that, you know, he was just distracting, also said he shouldn't be fooled into talking about anti-trans talking points. Why is acknowledging biological reality anti-trans? It's not. Because if there's no biological reality, there's no such thing as trans.
So why call them trans women if they're just women? At some point, they stop being trans.
Well, that's always been the circular logic.
This is the circular. I don't want to go into that now because we'll get tweets.
Let's wait till your show on Sunday.
Let's wait until my show on Sunday. I can deal with the tweets then. Tuesday's Telegraph now, and the government apparently now owns a stake in an upmarket swingers company. Lewis, you know a lot about this subject.
I know down-market swingers company. I don't know about well, it's the Telegraph, which is fantastic. And it's like during the time that the government was printing money and then being surprised when this devalued money was so devalued that doctors are asking for 30% more. Okay, they gave money to an upmarket swingers club
called Killing Kittens.
Have you been there?
Killing Kittens.
Have you been there?
No, but I was once invited to Plato's Retreat in New York.
And is that a similar kind of thing?
It was, but it was when I was young, and I had plenty of opportunities.
I have to say that Plato's Retreat sounds a bit gay. Sounds like a gayer swinger thing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
No.
So maybe it's a good job you didn't go. But but you know, because you're not gay, not because I'm being homophobic. I mean, I think that the issue here, though, for me is
don't speak for me.
No, absolutely wouldn't dare. But isn't it strange that I suppose it's not just swingers clubs, is it? I mean, they were investing in all sorts of companies, weren't they?
And there's also another story that's been covered is how much of that was sort of ripped off stuff and went to nothing. So I know a bunch of people who did a few little dodgy things during that time. Certainly not me. I don't have any money, but it is interesting. Yeah, Killing Kittens. But yeah, she's connected to the Duchess of Cambridge, so you'll get a little pop-up advert coming up for Killing Kittens.
Goodness
if you are interested in why it's called Killing Kittens, it's a reference to a saying about the almighty smiting defenceless cats to punish those engaged in self-pleasure, which is probably what happened with that. Remember the lady put the cat in the bin?
I do remember that.
I wonder if she just had a little self-pleasure. And then that was...
Oh, interesting.
That's where it comes
from.
from.
I can't think about swingers parties, because I just think of Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
You know, that very creepy,
scary... It was
the
least sexy scene, the least sexy sex scene.
It wasn't meant to be scary, though, was it?
No, but it was meant to be sexy, at least, I imagine, and it was not.
No, it wasn't at all. Let's go on to Tuesday's Mail now. And free speech is under threat, apparently, with the government's proposed internet clear-up.
Yeah.
Josh, this is the online safety bill.
Yeah, so this is free speech. Obviously, that's more your domain. I mean, you've written a book about it, which I will read one day.
You keep saying you're going to read it.
I'm going to read it.
You never get around to it, Josh. You don't want to read it.
I do want to read it. It's on my bedside table. Oh. I am going to read it. I'm busy.
So snubbed.
OK. But in this particular case, yes, Lord Frost is basically saying that this flawed bill could be highly damaging to free speech because it's hard... One of the things he points out for criticism is that it's going to outlaw comments on social media that would actually be legal in the real world. So it's the only benefit to that, as he says, is the perennially offended who want to be protected from anything that they disagree with, aka the far left.
I mean, it's interesting that Lord Frost is weighing in on this now, because it does feel as though this has just been sailing through without sufficient pushback. And the problem with the online safety bill is you're going to get a situation where you know, Ofcom are going to be regulating the internet. Major social media companies are going to be liable for everything on their platform, and they can lose, what, 10% of their annual revenue as a fine? So they're just going to censor everything because they're going to be absolutely terrified. And, you know, this is not a good idea to encourage social media platforms to censor more. They already do it enough.
Well, this is the whole thing is about the mainstream media, who's losing its power, losing its grip. And every one of these, these articles are about basically that. This is the Daily Mail, the Times saying, we've got to shut down the internet. And their day is gone. But in the future, we won't be reading from the newspapers. There won't be any
You always find a conspiratorial reason.
It's not
for the articles.
it's you know what? It's not a conspiratorial. It's economic efficiency.
Okay.
Look, there are children that do need to be protected. There are things of this bill that are of value. But as it says here, the problem with focusing on what people get offended by, then what is called a hate crime to a person, one person, is different from another person. Saying that sex is binary, some people would consider that a hate crime.
They absolutely do. OK, well, look, we've got to end this part there. But coming up after the break, we're going to be looking at Swedish sleuths, Porker paramedics, and police called to non-crime hate incidents. You won't want to miss that.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle. And this is the part of the show where things tend to get a little weird. And to help me through those stories, we have Josh Howie and Lewis Schaefer. And we're delving right inside the papers now to some of the more obscure stories. Here's Tuesday's Guardian, and sticking with our theme of the online safety bill. So young people are now being encouraged to report harmful content to Ofcom, Josh.
Yeah.
But what do they mean by harmful content?
Well, I mean, I guess what they say, actually, it's offensive or bad language, misinformation, scams, fraud, unwelcome friend or follow requests, trolling, and bullying and abusive behaviour. So there is a lot of this content out there, and they're also saying, Ofcom says 67% of 13 to 24-year-olds have seen this harmful content of those different examples, but only 17% report it. I feel like they're focusing on getting people to report it. It feels a bit like victim blaming here.
Really?
Like somehow that, oh, well, they're seeing it, and because they're not reporting it, it's not getting pulled or whatever.
My slight problem with this is that they're talking about how when they outline what precisely they mean by harmful content, the biggest one 28% is bad language.
Yeah.
And then you've got misinformation, which could be anything. And then you've got trolling, which could be anything. So the smallest amount is bullying, abuse and threats. That's 14%. So actually most of this is stuff that really everyone who's online has to get accustomed to because, it's just there. And it's not dangerous in the way that, say, illegal content is dangerous. This is just offensive content.
Well, I mean, it can be dangerous in the way that scamming a 15-year-old who then goes and gets their parents' credit card, or like misinformation, teaching people wrong stuff, bad language. You try and protect your children as well as you can.
Yes.
Also, unwelcome friend or follow requests. This could be from dodgy people trying to get hold. So there's a lot of dodginess out there on the internet that does need to be.
I just worry that they're sort of cultivating this idea that when people get older, they should start reporting anyone who upsets them whatsoever. Because if I did that, I'd be reporting everyone.
You know what?
This is. But there's a problem out there, and how do we deal with this?
Sure.
Well, but first of all, what is scamming is one thing, where you try to take people's money and things like that. Which is
like people going to your gigs.
But they don't have to pay. And but all this stuff is about perception, and that's one of the big problems that we live in this world. It's a kind of a feminized world where everything's feelings, and if I feel slighted, and so what they're saying to these people, if you feel slighted, but obviously these kids haven't felt that slighted because they would have reported it.
Well, no, I mean, look, you can't get a teenager to brush their teeth, let alone actually.
But you know what? If a teenager were upset about something, you'd hear about it. These people, if someone an unwelcome friend request, they want to go to the federal government,
or whoever, the police,
or whoever, the police over an unwelcome friend request.
Well, look, we're going to stay on that sort of theme now. We're going to the Daily Mail now, and this is a strange one. Non-crime hate incidents are back.
Oh yeah. So this is a boy who was 11 was called Shorty and a leprechaun.
I was called so much worse when I was 11.
What do you mean? Like just outside we were calling you those words.
Yeah.
So,
and I can't even repeat them because it's not suitable for TV.
No, it was Shorty and leprechaun. So officers in Wiltshire basically have now opened, gave them a non-crime hate incident.
This is an 11-year-old.
Yeah, well, the 11-year-old was the victim.
I assume the one who called him Shorty and a leprechaun was also around the same age.
It could be Lewis.
It could well be Lewis.
But it's a problem because when you have that, you have it's on your criminal record for 6 years.
Well, wait, there's two issues here. Why are the police getting involved with an 11-year-old full stop? Because that's the job for teachers and parents. But secondarily, hate incidents, non-crime hate incidents that the police record thousands of all the time, have been declared unlawful by the Court of Appeal. Yeah. They're unlawful, and the College of Policing won't get rid of them. They just sort of say, oh, well, we'll change the wording and we'll work around. No, abandon them because they're against the law.
You want to know why it is, Andrew? Because we British people live in a country where there's a queen, where the queen is manipulating things behind everybody's back. It's totally... You think it's a joke. It's totally related, where the police think that they can do whatever they want.
Well, there is that sense now, and I start to think that the College of Policing shouldn't...
They're not fit for purpose in this matter, certainly. I mean, because the whole point of this non-crime incident is that it's the perception by the victim or any other person. So if you overhear something, and I just think, how many gigs have I had... people complaining, people coming up and whatever. It's like, no, you're just too stupid to get who the actual victim of that joke was or whatever. So the idea that someone's going to rock up and just now you've got this hate crime incident on your record,
but also it's terrifying. But it's not even hate crime; it's non-crime.
Yeah, it's non-hate. Yeah, but it's a non-crime incident, but it's still a non-hate crime.
But the police, by definition, are not meant to be dealing with non-crime.
Crime.
Because non-crime is out of their remit. They deal with crime.
But it's about perception, and that's like what I said in the earlier story.
It's 10,000 incidents on a yearly basis. By the way, Wiltshire Police, the police force which has happened to, is obviously the worst force in the country when it comes to rape, dealing with cracking just 1 in 140 rape cases. Maybe you guys should just get on with that.
Get the priorities right. OK, Tuesday's Mirror now, and this is a real meaty story. Lewis, it's a bit of a...
it's a meta story. So it's like a Jewishly owned company is giving money to the Palestinians.
No, that's not this story.
What's the story?
We were talking about the fat porker story.
The fat porker story.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Well, it's been moved around. Okay.
This is a paramedic who was suspended after calling a colleague a fat porker.
Well, a case could be made. We in the Western world is like rife with obesity, type 2 diabetes, all the metabolic disorders, that doing a public service.
So you think fat shaming people is actually going to help them to develop their health?
I think the whole country should be fat shamed, yes. I don't think people are responsible for their fatness. I don't believe that. I think the inherent food itself is too plentiful and it's too addictive. But it has to do with uric acid.
But let's not get into that. This story in particular, right? So
this story
the problem is this ambulance worker.
Yeah.
Kept calling a colleague fat. And
2 weeks worth of abuse, basically.
It was abuse, right?
Yeah.
And then says, but that's my free speech. And people really misunderstand this about free speech.
Yeah, because he read your book.
No, my book does not say that part of
people fat.
That you can behave in a grossly unprofessional way and say that's my free speech, right? That's not. It's a completely different thing. You know?
You're totally right about this. It has no place in any business. No. But they're saying it's a equality and diversity issue. It isn't. It's just being nice to your fellow workers.
Well, it's contractual. You know? I mean, when I was a teacher, you know, I had to teach a number of different books. If I only taught them about, I don't know, coastal erosion on the Iberian Peninsula because that was my thing, and I didn't cover any of the curriculum, and I just said, well, that's my free speech, you can't fire me. That's a joke. No, there are professional obligations.
What that man said about its free speech is basically using the debunked Amber Heard defense, where she said it was free speech. She said that her right to defame Johnny Depp was free speech. The fact is that this guy wasn't being nice. It's not an equality issue. It's not a diversity issue. It shouldn't be a member of law.
Well, I tell you what, Lewis, if he was not working with her and he called her fat or whatever, I would say that was his free speech.
Yes.
And she's free not to listen. But at work, in a professional context, how can you...
But if he shouted that down the street, then how do you not listen to that? That's my question for you.
Oh, no, but that's the question about harassment and when it tips into that level of harassment.
So if he shouted out once, even once, it's going to upset her, and she can't not hear it that first time if it's like across the road.
But you would have to speak to a harassment lawyer. I would say that harassment is only really qualified when it's continual.
OK, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think one instance of someone... Because people shout at me on the street all the time. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah, but you deserve it. And that's
I do sort of deserve it a little bit, don't I?
No, you don't. You're great, Andrew.
Well, thank you, Lewis. I was actually just fishing for a compliment there. Tuesday's Mail now. And don't you just hate it when your trusted partner has links to an alleged terror group? Josh?
Yes, so let's get into this.
Oh, dear.
So yes, as Lewis basically said... Oh, it's Lewis who's also doing it. Sorry.
No, Josh, introduce the story
OK,
since
fine.
you've started.
Yeah, so Facebook is funding and working closely with a pro-Palestinian charity that is linked to alleged terror groups, including that revere convicted killers and had a Holocaust denier as a guest speaker. Allegedly. Well, they did, but this is all put forward by a sort of pro-Zionist think tank that has kind of uncovered all of these very dodgy connections. And I would argue, because I fight a lot of this stuff online, look, I want peace, pro-Palestinian, but the fact is when you go into a lot of these charities, there's some you don't have to get too far before the anti-Semitism's
Do you think it's possible that Facebook has inadvertently, that they didn't know that there were all these connections?
No, of course it is, because on the face of it, it seems good. Oh, we're pushing for Palestinian voices. That's good. But the problem is that these guys, with their dodgy connections, which are very much proven here, are the people who are calling the shots as to what gets out and what is revealed. And it's not just Facebook. It also turns out they're involved with Twitter.
Right. It's so difficult to know, though, isn't it, Lewis, who you're associating with and who their associates are?
Well, the problem is that Zuckerberg is Jewish, and it's a Jewishly owned company, and they should,
What, you think he should pick his allies more wisely?
Well, what's the point of owning a business if you can't do what you want to do? And I feel like Zuckerberg is sort of being pushed into a corner over this.
Well, I just think they didn't know, and I think that because that's the problem is a lot of these, like I say, charities sound good on the front, and then underneath you pull up the hood, and there's just a lot of darkness on.
You're saying they don't know. They know exactly.
I feel like Facebook should know. If anyone should know, those with the access to all of the information in the world definitely should, and our private information at that. Anyway, Times next. This is Tuesday's Times. An extraordinary story about podcasters maybe having an impact.
Yeah. Well, this is like one of those Swedish dark box sets.
Like The Killing.
Or
is that Norwegian?
I don't know.
But audio.
Yes.
And
audio. So what's happened?
What's happened is that some guy got killed, and back 50 years ago, this old guy who was on the TV remembers this, and he decided to mess around. And it involves, it's a very complicated story. It involves the neighbor who owns a mink farm wanting to buy the rich guy who's a lonely guy living at home on this island's area for the water.
So this sounds like a plot of a film, but it's a real true life murder mystery.
Yeah.
And the podcasters have solved it, right?
Well, it says that they
well, they have solved it because they, at the end of the story, someone on the day saw the supposed murderer who died a few years ago, where he went for a walk, and they sent this dog that sniffs out bones to this site, and they found evidence of human remains there.
So, I mean, basically, if Miss Marple were a real person, she'd be on a podcast these days. That's what. Anyway, Tuesday's Mail now. Car manufacturer Jaguar focusing on the important stuff here, Josh.
Yes, so they are banning the word slave, which is a term that's used in engineering, as in the master and the slave. It's a relationship between the components and the parts, and they are going to call it instead surrogates.
Right, OK. Surrogates.
Oi.
Well, no, I suppose because the word slave is considered offensive.
Yeah, but it's like one of those words that has other meanings within different contexts.
Yes.
You know, so this is within the context of engineering.
Yes.
It has, and it's also like, by the way, Jaguar, modern slavery still exists. So let's not pretend this is just one thing. And I'd like to see the people who are actually mining the minerals that make the chips that go into your cars.
I think it's funny because one of the workers told The Sun in this article, he says, it's so stupid. He says, no one here supports slavery. We just want to build cars and go home.
Well, that's it, the go home part. And this is it, the real world meeting this ridiculous ideology.
OK, let's move on now to The Guardian now. This is, well, sadly, this is not all art being appreciated. This one man saved an artist's
It's actually
work.
a really heartening story. There's someone, they lived in the same apartment block or whatever. This old man died, and his neighbour went out and saw all his stuff getting chucked out. He wasn't married or anything. This person, all his stuff was just going a bit. And he sees all of his art, and he's managed to save some of it, put it online, and people are going crazy.
And so this art, this is an artist called George Westron.
Yeah.
And we can see some of the art there. And as you can see, I mean, that's very much evocative of Bridget Riley.
Yes.
It has that quality of
But it's in felt tip, which is quite interesting. And they're saying that's because that's all he could afford.
I mean, it's incredible stuff. And they found it in a skip.
Yeah.
So these people were just... He did say he wasn't able to save all of it.
Yeah, he did, but he got about 150 of drawings.
But you just wonder, don't you, how much, in terms of how much have we lost it throughout the history of art, of people just throwing away things and they don't know the value of the thing they're throwing away. They're just chucking it in the bin.
But at the end of the day, everybody's an artist in today's world. Everybody's got paper. Everybody's producing stuff. I myself have saved the artwork of 2 artists myself. Okay, yes, they're my children, but I've saved everything from their little when they were 5 years old.
Well, and fine works of art they are.
At some point, we have to figure out how to throw art away. There's too much.
Well, not that.
No,
I thought that looked fantastic.
I think that's really good. But you just kind of think like there are so many examples of this kind of thing. Like Lawrence of Arabia, T.E. Lawrence, his first manuscript of the 7 Pillars of Wisdom, he left at a train station in Reading. Yeah. And he never got it back. And so someone probably just picked that up and thought, oh, what's this? And chucked it in the bin. And I mean, he rewrote the whole thing. Yeah. But, you know, we don't know what we've lost. You know, and I always say, like, people, if they go through their stuff in their attics and they find manuscripts or they find old artwork or so, don't throw it away. Like, it might be something.
Be a hoarder.
And it's the same thing with buildings. You know, I support that. You know, we shouldn't be tearing down buildings.
No, we absolutely should.
Any buildings.
No, exactly. Well, anyway, let's move on now to the Mirror. Ever fancied a holiday up in the clouds, Lewis?
Oh, this is ridiculous. This is one of those stories, really, the Mirror. It's like a flying hotel. Some guy proposes a flying hotel up in the sky, which is going to fly around overnight so that it'll solve a problem on Earth. There's not enough hotel rooms on Earth. And it'll be environmentally correct because it's going to run on fairy dust and angel wings. Oh, no. Yeah, sorry, I misread it. This is for Josh. By nuclear fusion, which has yet to be invented.
So I was going to ask, can they actually do this?
No, of course they can't do it. It's completely made up.
What's the point of the article? They're saying that this is something they want to do, Josh. Is that what the idea?
Yeah, someone basically did a concept idea of it and say, hey, one day we're going to have these massive aeroplanes. It's like this, there's a film about the train that goes around the world, Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
And it's like a self-reliant train, and they're saying that this won't have any people working on it, and it's just going to be automated. And
it's not a story, though, is it? It's just someone's idea to do a floating...
I guess the Mirror had to fill up a few minutes, and we did too.
Well, fair enough. It's in Swift. It's in Gulliver's Travels, the Isle of Laputo, the flying island. Like, Swift thought of it first. Yeah. Anyway, that's the end of the show now. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to my panellists, Lewis Schaefer and Josh Howie. And don't forget to join us tomorrow at the same time, 11 o'clock, where we'll take you through the top news stories. See you then. Farewell.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Tonight on Farage, as Prince Charles takes millions in cash, I'll be joined by Michael Cole, former BBC Royal correspondent, to ask the simple question, is Charles fit to be king? Andrew Bridget MP joins me. He is the chief of